You ever notice how we kind of throw around words like nation, state, and country? Like, they all mean the same thing.
Yeah, definitely.
It's funny, though, when you think about it, like, we have the United Nations, this huge global organization, but is it really made up of nations in the sense of shared cultures and histories?
Right. It's more a group of states, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. Why getting these basic building blocks of international relations right is so important.
Absolutely.
It's like having the right map before you even start a journey.
Perfect analogy.
We're going deep into this global affairs course module we have here, which is designed to be really thorough. So consider this your fast track to understanding what really makes the world tick.
It really is comprehensive, this module. Covers a broad spectrum issues, concepts, theories, approaches, and even those lively debates that keep IR scholars busy.
Yeah, it's organized into 6 chapters. Today we're laying the foundation with that crucial first chapter. So what's in it for you listening in?
Well, think of it this way. We're cutting through all the academic jargon to deliver the core principles shaping global events.
Exactly. We're going beyond just reacting to headlines.
Right. We're equipping you to understand the deeper forces driving them.
Because let's face it, today's world is,
Complex.
to say the least.
Yeah,
Getting these fundamentals down helps you make sense of it all.
I couldn't agree more. You know, flipping through the daily news, it's easy to get lost in the sheer volume of it all. Meetings here, conflicts there, new agreements.
Yeah, it can feel very disconnected.
It can. But here's where international relations as a discipline steps in. It gives us that much-needed lens.
Right. To zoom out and see the underlying principles.
Exactly, to find those patterns and connections.
That's like that famous saying, can't see the forest for the trees.
Ah, very true.
So chapter 1 dives right in, acknowledging the messy nature of international news, but then shifting to a more, well, organized approach.
It encourages us to, think big.
Yeah, big picture thinking about what international relations actually is.
How it came to be and why it looks the way it does now.
It sets out these clear objectives, starting with defining nation-state nationalism, words we use all the time.
But often without a clear understanding of their nuances.
And that's the first question it throws at us, isn't it? Why should we care about these definitions? What's their significance in the grand scheme of things?
Excellent question. And the module points out right off the bat that nationalism, well, it might just be the most potent force in international affairs.
When you think about it, it's fueled so much of history.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Revolutions, wars, empires crumbling, new borders drawn, states formed.
And even today, it's shaping regimes around the world. It's a powerful tool.
No doubt about it.
Now, the module brings in Haywood's definition of nationalism, which gets to the core of it.
It defines it as this doctrine, this idea that the nation, that sense of shared identity, is the fundamental building block of society.
Leading to the rise of the nation-state, that model we see so prevalent today. And here's where being precise with our language is crucial. As we touched upon earlier, nation, state, and country, they're not really interchangeable, even though we often use them that way.
Right. The United Nations example perfectly illustrates that. It's a gathering of states, not nations in the cultural sense.
So let's break it down for our listeners. What exactly is a nation? According to our source material, that is.
Okay, so drawing on Haywood, the module defines nations as, well, these historical entities. They develop over time.
Organically.
Exactly, from communities with shared ethnic origins, common myths, legends, songs, that kind of deep-seated collective belonging, a sense of shared destiny, that's what makes a nation.
It's fascinating how potent that sense of shared identity can be.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got nation down. Now, what happened towards the end of the 18th century? There was a real turning point then, wasn't there?
Oh, a major one. It's when state and nation fused together, creating this new entity, the nation state.
And it wasn't just a word change. It was a whole new way of organizing power, right?
Precisely. It signified a fundamental shift in how political power was structured and really how societies pursued their collective goals. The module stresses this distinction. A nation, that community with shared identity, its roots go way back, but it took center stage in the 18th century.
It became the focus of political aspirations.
Right. You could even say it injected a soul, a shared purpose into that more bureaucratic machine of the early modern state.
It gave it a direction, a mission.
Precisely. And this fusion, while incredibly powerful, has also been a source of immense conflict.
Because this drive for national self-determination, well, It often clashed with existing borders,
Absolutely. It challenged the existing order.
led to wars, disputes. We see it throughout history.
Yes, unfortunately.
So it's like this idea emerged that the nation should, in essence, take control of the state,
Right, nationalist leaders started arguing that the state should serve the nation.
become a tool to achieve its goals, its aspirations.
Exactly. And looking back, you can see just how successful these movements were in reshaping the political map.
I mean, the American and French revolutions are prime examples, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Textbook cases, you could say. The module points out how a phrase like, "we the people," in the U.S. Constitution would have been unthinkable before.
In those earlier eras where power resided solely with the monarch,
Exactly. The king was the state. Take pre-revolutionary France, for instance.
the king held all the power, excluding most of the population from any real political participation.
Right. And you also had the aristocracy and the church holding immense sway.
But then 1789 came along and everything changed.
The French Revolution. It completely overturned the old regime.
Liberty, equality, fraternity.
Those became the new guiding principles.
The nation itself became the source of legitimacy, not the king.
A radical shift.
Then you have the Congress of Vienna in 1815 trying to put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak.
Trying to rewind history back to the pre-revolution days.
But it's like you said, nationalist sentiments had taken root. They couldn't be easily erased.
Right. It was a losing battle from the start. The module underscores this. Nationalism was spreading, and it posed a fundamental challenge to this idea of restoring the old order.
It's like trying to dam a river that's already overflowing.
Exactly. National communities all across Europe were increasingly demanding recognition.
Their right to self-determination.
Precisely. It was this inherent tension between the old guard and these burgeoning nationalist movements that defined much of 19th century European politics.
And this is where we start to see nationalism merging with liberal ideals.
Yes, very much so. The early to mid-19th century saw this strong link between nationalism and the liberal idea of self-determination.
The right of a people to choose their own political destiny.
Exactly. This had massive implications, not just internally for how states were organized, but also for international relations.
It challenged the legitimacy of those vast European empires.
Oh, absolutely. Empires that ruled over diverse national groups.
So if you accept the principle of self-determination, the map has to change.
It has to. The 1848 uprisings across Europe are a testament to this, even though many were ultimately suppressed.
But they were a sign of things to come.
They were. The genie was out of the bottle. The module explains how, despite setbacks, this desire for national recognition persisted.
Especially among those rising middle classes who wanted a say in how they were governed.
They had economic clout, and they were increasingly using the language of nationalism to demand a political order that reflected their aspirations.
A system aligned with their national identity.
Precisely. It wasn't just about individual rights, it was about collective rights.
The rights of the nation.
Exactly, and we see this across Europe. Finns, Bulgarians, Serbs, so many groups striving for independence.
The unification of Italy in 1861 is a prime example.
A landmark moment.
Yeah.
And then, of course, World War I became this major turning point.
That's when self-determination gained widespread international recognition as a legitimate right.
A game changer. It led to the redrawing of Europe's map, the creation of numerous new nation-states.
Out of the ashes of the old empires.
Precisely. And it's this shift that truly ushered in what we can call an international system.
As opposed to the earlier Westphalian interstate system.
Exactly. It's a distinction the module highlights. From states to nations. Though, as it points out, many of the underlying principles remained similar.
Nation-states still asserted their sovereignty, claiming equality with each other.
That core element of state power remained.
And this takes us to today, where the role and implications of nationalism are still debated.
Oh, very much so. The module discusses the ongoing debate surrounding nationalism in the 21st century.
It's not a simple concept. Nation-states are facing all sorts of pressures today.
Right. Globalization, economic interdependence, transnational issues.
Challenges to their traditional authority.
Exactly. But, as the module notes, there's also this contrasting view.
That nationalism might actually be experiencing a resurgence.
Especially after the Cold War. Religion, culture, ethnicity, these factors are re-emerging as potent forces.
Like that whole clash of civilizations idea versus the end of history narrative.
Yes. Two very different takes on the future.
Okay, so we've covered a lot about nations and states. But what about you, our listener? Why should you care about international relations as a field of study? beyond just these core concepts?
That's a question we all need to ask ourselves, especially in today's world. The module makes a compelling point here. International relations isn't just some abstract academic discipline. It's deeply woven into our everyday lives.
It's becoming increasingly relevant to our personal experiences.
Absolutely. That separation between domestic and international, it's blurring more and more.
Decisions made on the other side of the world can have very real impacts on us here.
Precisely. And that's where understanding IR becomes crucial.
Can you give us some tangible examples of how this international dimension touches our lives?
Think about it. Watching a foreign film, traveling abroad, even that cup of fair trade coffee you might enjoy.
They all connect us to the global network.
They do. And if you work for almost any company today, chances are you're dealing with international laws, regulations, cross-border interactions. It's unavoidable.
IR helps us navigate this complex web.
Precisely. It gives us the tools to understand the news we consume, to see our place within those wider networks. We're all part of this global community with rights and responsibilities.
And IR empowers us to participate in those big debates shaping our world.
Exactly. It helps us recognize those crucial connections, geographical, intellectual, social. We're more interconnected than ever.
It's fascinating how IR as a formal discipline emerged. Wasn't always there, was it?
Right. Used to be tucked away within other disciplines like law, philosophy, history.
But World War I was this turning point.
That devastating conflict really spurred people to search for answers, how to prevent another such catastrophe.
And that's when the first university chair dedicated to international relations was established.
In 1919 at the University of Wales, a direct response to the horrors of war.
So because it came from these diverse roots, there isn't one single universally accepted definition of what IR is.
Exactly. It's a field with many different approaches and perspectives.
But broadly speaking, how does our module define IR today?
Well, it emphasizes this wide range of interactions between individuals, groups, companies, NGOs, governments, nations, states.
It's about the whole spectrum of interactions that cross borders.
Precisely. And it's not just about official state-to-state relations.
Sometimes even individual choices can have political ripple effects.
Absolutely. Think about going on a vacation abroad or buying imported goods.
Seemingly personal choices, but they feed into those larger political and economic relationships between countries.
Right. And then, of course, you have the more obvious examples like international conflicts, global summits on climate change, transnational crime. These are central to IR.
It's about understanding the forces that shape our world, both big and small.
Exactly. And as the module highlights, no state or entity can truly exist in isolation anymore.
This idea of inescapable participation.
Precisely. Even the most powerful nations rely on others in this interconnected world.
And this brings us to the concept of anarchy in international relations, which can often sound a bit scary.
It's a core concept, but it doesn't necessarily mean chaos. It refers to the absence of a global ruler, a world government that can enforce rules universally.
So it's more about this decentralized nature of power.
Exactly. There's no single authority calling the shots.
Each state has to navigate this system, considering the actions and interests of others.
Right. It's a world of foreigners, as the module puts it. And this is where the distinction between domestic and international politics becomes really clear.
Within a country, you have laws, enforcement mechanisms, a shared sense of community.
Right. But internationally, it's different. Law is more about competing systems without a common enforcer. There's no global police force.
So states have to rely on themselves for security.
That's the self-help principle. And because there's no shared identity or values on a global scale, disagreements about what's right or just are inevitable.
It's a world of diverse perspectives and often conflicting interests.
Precisely. And that's why conflict, or at least disagreement, is at the heart of both domestic and international politics. It's about how we manage those differences.
It's amazing how issues that once seemed purely local can suddenly become global concerns.
Oh, absolutely. Think about outbreaks like SARS or avian flu. What starts within one country quickly spills over borders, impacting foreign policy, trade, travel.
It forces countries to cooperate, to coordinate their responses.
Exactly. This interconnectedness is inescapable. And it's why IR is such a crucial field of study. It's complex, it requires careful analysis, and we can't just ignore it.
The module highlights those key concepts of inescapable participation, the blurring lines between domestic and international, and the enduring philosophical debates about human nature that shape different approaches to IR.
Those are fundamental, and the contrasting views of Hobbes and Locke are particularly relevant here.
Can you give us a quick recap of their ideas and why they matter for IR?
Of course. So Hobbes, writing in the 17th century, witnessed the chaos of civil war.
Not a pretty picture.
Not at all. He described this state of nature where life is brutal, short, and nasty. Everyone's out for themselves.
It's that classic every man for himself scenario.
Exactly. And he argued for the need for a strong sovereign, a ruler, to maintain order.
It's an idea that resonates with some realist thinkers in IR who see the world as inherently anarchic and prone to conflict.
Right. But then you have Locke offering a more optimistic view. He believed in humans' inherent capacity for reason, for cooperation.
He believed we could have a society governed by natural laws, even without a ruler constantly enforcing them.
Exactly. And this idea that humans are fundamentally capable of good, it underpins a lot of liberal thought in IR. So these two contrasting views of human nature, they continue to shape how we approach international relations today.
So when we talk about international politics, it's essentially about achieving group objectives in this complex web of interacting actors.
Precisely. It's about the interplay of power, interests, and goals. Every group, whether it's a state or an NGO or a corporation, wants to achieve its aims, but it's always operating within a system where others are also trying to do the same.
So it's this constant balancing act, trying to achieve your goals while taking into account the actions and reactions of others.
Right. And while using force should ideally be a last resort, the module acknowledges that it still happens, citing the 2003 invasion of Iraq as an example.
It highlights the challenge of finding peaceful solutions in a world where power dynamics are constantly shifting.
Exactly. And it's a challenge that's only growing as the field of IR itself expands.
More actors, more issues, more interconnections.
Precisely. The module highlights the explosion in the number of independent states over time and the phenomenal growth of international organizations. The UN is a prime example.
Started with 51 members in 1945, and now it has close to 200.
And it's not just about numbers. The levels of interdependence between states have also increased dramatically.
We rely on each other for goods, services, ideas.
It's a web of interconnectedness. But, as the module emphasizes, power within the system isn't evenly distributed.
Some states are more powerful than others.
Exactly. Which means that power, coercion, bargaining, these elements remain central to understanding how IR works.
It's not a level playing field.
It's not. And this raises those big questions about how we maintain peace and order in such a complex and often unequal system.
Questions that IR theories grapple with.
They do, and that's what we'll explore later in our discussion.
Now, let's take a step back and look at the historical roots. How did this whole system of modern international relations actually come about?
The module traces the story back to medieval Europe, to the rise of the sovereign state. But it stresses that this wasn't some neat, linear process.
More like a messy, gradual evolution.
Exactly. Medieval Europe was a patchwork of overlapping jurisdictions and highly localized power structures.
Life for most people revolved around their immediate community.
Right. Political authority was fragmented. You had feudal lords, independent cities, states ruled by religious figures, all these little principalities and duchies.
It was a very decentralized system.
It was. And yet you had these two institutions claiming some degree of universal authority.
The Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire.
Exactly. The Church, headquartered in Rome, exerted immense spiritual influence. Its reach extended beyond just religious matters, shaping law, language, culture.
It was a powerful force.
It was. And then you had the Holy Roman Empire, which claimed legitimacy derived from ancient Rome.
But in reality, it wasn't as powerful as its name might suggest.
No, it was more of a loose federation, a collection of smaller political units with the emperor as a figurehead.
So it was this curious mix of highly localized power coexisting with these aspirations for a more centralized universal authority.
Precisely. But as the module explains, from the 14th century onwards, this system starts to change. The state emerges as this new, more powerful entity.
Yeah, force to be reckoned with.
And these new states, they challenge both those universal institutions and those smaller local authorities.
It's like they're carving out their own space, asserting their independence.
Exactly. They wanted to govern themselves free from external interference.
And this process gained momentum in Italy first, didn't it?
Yes, the Italian city-states were really at the forefront of this shift.
They were masters of playing the Pope and the Emperor against each other.
Very strategic. They exploit those power struggles to their advantage, asserting their independence from both.
Divide and conquer.
Exactly. And similar dynamics were playing out in other parts of Europe. In Germany, the conflict between the Pope and the Emperor over appointing bishops.
It gave those smaller German states an opportunity to assert their autonomy.
Precisely. And the kings of France and England were also becoming bolder, defying papal authority.
The French even forced the Pope to relocate to Avignon for a period.
It's a remarkable historical episode. It shows how the balance of power was shifting.
And then the Reformation came along in the 16th century, and everything really blew up.
That's the major turning point, the split within the church, with figures like Luther and Calvin challenging its authority.
It fractured the religious and political landscape.
It did. And those newly emerging Protestant churches often aligned themselves with these new states.
Kings like Henry VIII in England and Gustav Vasa in Sweden used the Reformation to consolidate their power.
Oh, absolutely. They broke from Rome, confiscated church lands, and further centralized their authority.
So it wasn't just about challenging the church. It was also about bringing those local authorities to heel.
Precisely. These new states were engaged in a constant struggle to solidify their control.
And this led to a lot of conflict, didn't it? Wars, peasant revolts.
It did. The module mentions uprisings in Germany, conflicts in Sweden, Croatia, England, France. It was a turbulent period.
It's like the birth pangs of the modern state system.
A very apt analogy. And as these states consolidated their power, they needed to develop new mechanisms of governance.
They needed to administer their territories, collect taxes, defend their borders.
Exactly. And so we see the rise of more sophisticated administrative systems, the development of standing armies.
These were crucial for maintaining order and projecting power,
They were. And the module points out that all of this state building was incredibly expensive,
leading to a constant need for revenue.
which often led to conflict with their own populations.
It's a reminder that state power isn't always benevolent.
No, it's often about extracting resources and maintaining control.
So out of all this conflict and competition, the European state system as we know it began to emerge.
It did. The focus shifted from those struggles against universal and local authorities to the rivalries between states themselves.
States vying for power, influence, territory.
Precisely. And the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648 is a prime example of this new dynamic.
One of the most brutal conflicts in European history.
It devastated the German lands, reduced the population by a third. It was a war with multiple layers, religious conflicts between Catholics and Protestants, and then those broader power struggles with France opposing the Habsburgs of Austria.
A real geopolitical tangle.
It was. And the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648 marks the end of this conflict and, symbolically, the beginning of a new order.
The birth of the modern state system.
Exactly. The Treaty of Westphalia enshrined the principle of state sovereignty.
That each state has the exclusive right to rule its territory, to make its own decisions in relation to other states.
Precisely. It's the foundation of the modern international system. And alongside sovereignty, you have the principle of formal equality between states, no matter their size or power.
It's this idea that each state is treated as an equal actor on the world stage.
Right. But paradoxically, this also leads to the problem of anarchy.
Because if every state is sovereign, there's no higher authority above them to enforce rules or resolve disputes.
Exactly. It's a self-governing system. And this realization led to the development of diplomacy as we know it,
States sending ambassadors to each other's courts.
a way to manage these complex relationships to avoid constant misunderstandings and conflict.
It's about communication, negotiation, finding ways to coexist in this anarchical system.
Precisely. And so you start to see these diplomatic norms emerging. Extraterritoriality for ambassadors, immunity from local laws, inviolability of diplomatic dispatches.
Rules of the game,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Exactly. And while diplomacy didn't eliminate war, it did foster a sense of shared identity among those European elites.
A recognition that they were all part of this same system, even as they competed within it.
Precisely. But at this point, the impact of all these European developments on the rest of the world was still relatively limited.
With the major exception of the Americas, which were already undergoing colonization.
Right. The Americas were tragically becoming deeply entangled with Europe, but for most of Asia and Africa, things were different.
They had their own systems, their own ways of organizing political life and interacting with each other.
Exactly. The module emphasizes that those pre-existing systems were very diverse, often with different principles than the European model.
But then, as we know, The European model ended up shaping almost all of world politics,
That's a crucial point, and the 19th century is when that transformation really accelerates.
driven by the Industrial Revolution in Europe.
Precisely. The module explains how this economic revolution, with its new technologies, mass production, and increased need for markets,
It had a profound impact on how Europe interacted with the rest of the world.
it led to a scramble for resources, for markets, for control.
And ultimately to colonialism.
Exactly. European powers competing with each other for colonies, particularly in Africa and Asia.
Possessing colonies became a symbol of power and prestige.
It did. The more colonies you had, the more powerful you seemed.
And so, by the time World War I broke out, most of the globe was under some form of European domination.
That's right. With a few notable exceptions like China, Japan, Siam, Persia, Ethiopia. But even those were often heavily influenced by European powers.
It's a stark reminder of how European colonialism reshaped the global map.
It is, and the module highlights a really interesting point about how the European model spread beyond direct colonization.
You mean even after those colonies gained independence?
Exactly. It argues that the European model was often imposed as a condition for granting independence.
So those newly independent states had to adopt European-style institutions and systems if they wanted to be recognized as legitimate actors.
Precisely. They had to create states with defined territories, centralized governments, national armies, the whole package.
It's like those non-European leaders were forced to play by Europe's rules.
In a way, they were. Alternative models were rarely considered. And this is, in essence, how the modern world, with its current configuration of states and international relations, came to be.
It's quite a legacy.
It is.
Okay, so now that we've explored the historical context, let's dive into who the key actors are in IR today. Traditionally, it's been all about states.
Right, state-centric view.
But as we've seen, things are getting more complex.
Oh, much more. The module emphasizes that the scope of IR has broadened considerably. We can't just focus on states anymore.
Because there's this whole array of non-state actors playing increasingly important roles.
Exactly. International organizations like the UN, multinational corporations like Apple or Toyota, NGOs, various social movements, they all have an impact on global affairs.
It's a crowded stage.
It is. And trying to keep track of all the actors and issues can feel overwhelming.
But the module reminds us that IR is about trying to see those bigger patterns, those underlying forces that shape the world.
Finding order within the complexity.
So let's start with states, those traditional heavyweights. How does the module define them?
Well, it points out that there are around 195 recognized states in the world today.
Each with its unique characteristic.
Of course. But they also share some core features. A defined territory, borders, a capital city, a national army, a foreign ministry, a flag, an anthem.
The symbols and institutions of statehood.
Exactly. And crucially, they all claim to be sovereign.
Meaning?
That they have the exclusive right to govern their territory, to make their own decisions about their internal affairs and their interactions with other states.
Free from external interference.
Precisely. It's this claim to sovereignty that forms the basis of the modern state system.
And the module uses that metaphor of the world stage, with states as the main actors.
Right. States as the key players, pursuing their interests, making decisions that impact the global landscape.
And this is where we get that definition of international politics as primarily being about interactions between these sovereign states.
Exactly. States interacting within this anarchical system where there's no world government above them.
And this concept of anarchy is a core element of realist thinking in IR.
It is. Realists often contrast the anarchical nature of international relations with the hierarchical structure of domestic politics within states.
So within a state, there's a clear hierarchy of authority.
Right. The government, the laws, the courts. There's a system for making and enforcing rules.
But in the international system, there's no such ultimate authority.
Exactly. So states have to look out for themselves, which often leads to competition and conflict.
It's the self-help world.
It is.
Wow.
And despite the rise of other actors, the module concludes that states still matter a great deal.
State sovereignty remains a defining feature of IR.
Absolutely.
But we can't ignore those non-state actors anymore, can we?
We can't. They're becoming increasingly influential.
Multinational corporations, international organizations, NGOs,
They all shape global events in various ways.
and their ability to act independently, their agency is an important consideration.
Very important. The module raises that question. How much agency do these actors have? Can they really make a difference?
Because they're still operating within that broader system of states?
Right. They're constrained by those power structures,
Right.
by the anarchical nature of the system.
But they can also leverage their influence, their resources, to push for change.
They can. Think about how NGOs can mobilize public opinion, how corporations can influence trade policies, how international organizations can set global agendas.
They're not just passive bystanders.
They're not. And the module highlights multinational corporations as particularly influential.
Their economic power, their global reach.
It gives them a significant role in international relations. They can impact trade, investment, labor standards.
They're shaping globalization.
They are. And the module also mentions those transgovernmental organizations where interactions aren't necessarily controlled by states.
So even within governments, you have different agencies and departments interacting across borders, forming their own networks.
Exactly. It adds another layer of complexity.
But for many in IR, the state is still the primary focus.
Right. Especially for realists, who tend to view states as the most powerful actors.
Those who control territory, military forces, economic resources.
Precisely. But the module argues that we need a broader perspective.
One that takes into account the full range of actors and issues that shape international relations today.
Right. A more holistic view. And this leads to a fundamental question that IR theories try to answer.
Whether relations between states are primarily characterized by cooperation or conflict.
It's an enduring debate. Are states naturally inclined to cooperate, or are they inherently driven by self?